Hey everybody, today I am down in Los Angeles and I have finally been able to get my hands on the refreshed 2025 Acura MDX. This is the best-selling luxury three-row in America and has received some pretty major changes on the inside. But before we get to that, let's talk about the design. Up front, every model gets a new front-end look. You can see that it's pretty similar to the outgoing MDX, still instantly recognizable as an Acura, but the subtle tweaks have helped elevate the MDX versus the outgoing model. Still an absolutely enormous dinner plate-sized Acura logo there. In the Type S model, we get this unique diamond pentagon grille with these little openings here to help improve cooling. If you get the A-Spec version, then we get a front-end design that is very similar to this, but it has slightly different grills. Now, if you're talking about the Type S, then one thing that you can't see that's new in this model is we now have forward-looking radars integrated into the sides of the front bumper. That's so that way we get cross-traffic notification for forward-facing cross-traffic rather than just rear-facing cross-traffic like we had before. Now let's move over to the other model that they've brought along for 2025. Because this has the other look you'll find in the MDX lineup. This is an advanced trim, and the look of the base model and the non-A-Spec trims will be very much like this. You can see that we get more of a cross-hatch grille here, more of a, I guess, egg crate style grille than we found in the Type S, and you'll get a relatively similar grille fitted into the Type S bumpers if you take a look at the A-Spec trim. Every model is going to get the full LED headlights with the distinctive multi-module theme right there and the little squiggle right there in the daytime running light that also turns into the turn signal when it's activated. The big difference up front is the lower cooling grills that you'll find in the Type S because, of course, the turbocharged engine needs more cooling. Moving around to the side, every model gets new wheels and new tires over here. We have 275/40 R21s over here in the Type S. Nice big meaty tires and of course big brakes as well. You'll also notice one of the other styling cues that's unique to the Type S, and that's the shiny black trim around the vehicle. Most models will have black matte trim, but if you get yourself an advanced trim, we have body colored trim all the way around, helping dress things up, but definitely making it look a little bit more like some of the European options. One touch that I really appreciate is that we still have this chrome line that circles around the vehicle and then actually moves over here to the side view mirror and then extends over there to the front quarter panel. I think that's a really elegant touch. Now, as we come to the back end of the vehicle, you'll notice it's basically the same MDX that you've seen before with some very subtle changes. The taillights here, which are full LEDs, they are a darker design this time. They basically removed the chrome to help sharpen things up as far as the look. If you would like blacked out badges, you can get those from your dealer. Down here at the bottom of the bumper, it's all, of course, body color painted in this advanced trim, and then we get the same exhaust tips that we had before. Now for the biggest change for 2025. Acura has completely redesigned the infotainment experience, so let's dive inside and check that out. The first thing you're going to notice in here is that we have a new LCD and it's much closer to the driver. And that's because Acura has ditched my least favorite input method. There's no longer a touch panel right here in the center console. Instead, we have a touchscreen. To make the touchscreen work with the design of the vehicle, they moved the LCD closer to the driver. So you notice if I pan up here that we have that big speaker grille right there just in front of the LCD, and then we have the LCD closer to the driver and the front passenger. Again, it's a touchscreen interface. It of course supports smartphone integration, Apple CarPlay, or Android Auto, and you can choose to use most of the screen or have one side of the screen reserved for the vehicle widgets. So you can see things like your fuel economy, your compass, things like that right over there. And we have full Google integration into the system. So Google mapping there. You can also voice command Google for your destinations. You can do things like, take me to the Hollywood sign. And if it was internet connected, it would be able to do that. Right now it says it's offline. That's why we don't get any traffic data, but you don't need to be online for all of the voice command functions. That's definitely a nice touch right there. You can see that the design of the software is somewhat similar to the other Honda models that have used Google integration, but obviously it has been uniquely adapted to the Acura lineup. Now, if I move out from here, you'll notice some of the other major changes with this interior. Over here we find a Bang & Olufsen speaker right there on the A-pillar. It has a very distinctive design, and that's because we now get Bang & Olufsen sound systems in almost every MDX. I have to admit, I was surprised about the Bang & Olufsen transition, but I do think that it was the right move for Acura. The speaker grills on the door are these dark tinted speaker grills in the Type S, and then we have the dark wood above it. It's going to be a little bit different in the other models. I'll show you the advanced trim in just a second. But back up here to this speaker grill. Here's a closer look at it. You can see that it's a tweeter with this very interesting sound design here, sort of a sound guide here, and that's why it's sort of cone shaped. The bulk of the dashboard, however, that remains the same. So we still have a full color heads-up display there, and we still have a large LCD instrument cluster here on the driver's side, but now it includes that moving map display. So the software is not exactly the same as we had before. Now, because the screen is closer to the driver, obviously the entire upper section of the dash had to change, but the bulk of this remains the same as before. So we still get the same drive mode selector right there, same controls for the climate control system, the same push button shifter here, and then they restructured this portion of the dashboard a bit. Not only did they remove that touchpad, but they also gave us a larger and more usable wireless charging mat there. Of course, it supports wireless CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Two big cup holders right over there. Moving over to the interior of this advanced trim, you'll see that the Bang & Olufsen speaker grills are the lighter color. We also get a different real wood trim over there on the doors and on the dashboard. And we now have seats basically borrowed out of the previous generation Type S. So this generation Type S now gets newer seat designs with Type S embossed on the headrest, whereas the advanced trim gets the same seats that we had in the Type S as far as their design, which includes the massaging functionality that we did not find in the past. You can see that the dashboard design is definitely very much the same touchscreen right there in the center. And I like this combination of this sort of espresso mocha colored leather and the lighter wood trim on the dashboard. It's worth noting that if you're cross-shopping this against some of the Lexus competition, we don't find real wood trim at all in the Lexus TX. As to what's competition for the MDX, I'll let you all sound off down there in the comments section below. Historically, it has been cross-shopped most frequently with the Lexus RX, even though that is a smaller two-row vehicle. This obviously doesn't have as big of a third row as we find in the Lexus TX, but it's certainly more usable than not having one at all. Then we have the Volvo XC90, which is the second bestseller in this segment. And previously, I think I preferred the Volvo's interior as far as its functionality goes just a little bit more than this, but the new infotainment system really puts this in a different light. I also really appreciate the premium touches that we find in this interior, like the stitched dashboard components that you won't find in that Lexus TX, and then of course that real wood trim that I already mentioned. Now jumping into the second row of the MDX, I'm back in the Type S, although they're all going to be pretty similar, and that includes the fact that we still have a bench here in the second row. This is solidly a reason that you might want to choose the MDX over some of the competition that makes you get a captain's chair layout. But if you just want a 6-seat MDX, you can still take out the middle seat, and that has always been a really cool touch with this vehicle. You don't have anywhere to store this like you find in, say, the Honda Pilot, because the cargo area doesn't have anywhere big enough for this seat to sit, but you could leave it at home if you want more of that 6-passenger vehicle vibe. Although I will say, if you come in for a closer look here, that when this is removed, you do have the mounting points right here. I do kind of wish that Acura would give you just a little bit of a rubber insert or something that you could lock there in place to cover those mounting points off. But I really love the fact that this is user removable. Getting into the way back, that's pretty easy because we have a power tilt slide second row seat, manual third row seats, which is my preference because it's a lot faster to actually move them up and down. Pretty easy to get back here. As you can see, it's not as roomy as the third row that we find in the Lexus TX, but it actually compares pretty well to something like the Volvo XC90, especially since you again have that option of that removable and reinsertable second row middle seat there. One downside though is that the shoulder belt for that middle seat position does come out of the ceiling. It's not quite as big of a bump as we find in some vehicles where we have a shoulder belt in that position, and you should know that the third row is always going to be a two-person third row. So this is not as accommodating as some of those larger vehicles. I'll fold that down so that we can actually see that. Sorry for bumping the camera. The seat bottom cushion, it is a little bit low to the ground, but let's be honest. Most folks are probably going to leave these seats folded most of the time, which is why the back of this cargo area here and the passenger area is made of the same plastics and the same sort of carpet that we find back there in the cargo area. While I'm back here, I should point out that we have a ton of ceiling speakers, 12 to be exact in the Type S model. You'll get 4 ceiling speakers if you get the other Bang & Olufsen sound systems, and the Bang & Olufsen sound systems are standard in every MDX except for the bass trim. If you're a numbers person, the total speaker count comes in at 31 for the Type S, 19 for most other versions, and 8 if you get the base version of the MDX. But let's talk about the cargo area, because this is solidly a reason to buy the MDX over the average 2-row luxury SUV that's going to be in the same price range. We not only have the practicality of that third row, even though it is a little on the small side, But then of course we have lots of cargo area if that third row is folded. And again, you'll notice that we have some of the harder plastics back here because it is really a cargo area most of the time. Under the floor, we have some additional storage space in the Type S model, but importantly, no spare tire. These are self-sealing tires, not run flats, and that's because we don't have a spare in this model, mainly because of the big tires and the big wheels that we find in this particular model. But even if you're not looking at the Type S, you'll notice that the MDX has a ton of standard feature content on it, and that is solidly one reason to get the MDX, and logically one of the reasons that the MDX is the best seller in this segment in North America. Tons of active driver assistance tech is standard, things like adaptive cruise control, the aggressive lane centering software, etc. Features that are optional on even a Mercedes or a BMW that are going to be significantly more expensive than this. Under the hood, we find the same engines that we had before. Naturally, this is a refresh, not a complete redesign of the MDX, so you have your choice of either a 290 horsepower 3.5-liter V6, you'll find that in every trim except for the Type S. The Type S, of course, gets the 355 horsepower single turbo V6. That's basically the same one that we find in the TLX Type S as well. And of course, super handling all-wheel drive is standard on the Type S, just as you'd expect. It's not quite as powerful as some of the European options. However, it is definitely significantly faster than the other MDX. If I were shopping for an MDX, the Type S is absolutely the way that I would go. If you want to get your hands on the 2025 MDX, now's the time to reach out to your Acura dealer because they probably have a wait list going on and you'll be able to buy one of these in May of 2024. Now, unfortunately, I don't know how much one is going to cost you, but we can make some predictions here. The current MDX spans from about $50,000 up to about $75,000. This is probably going to be a modest increment on that pricing structure. I would expect something like this advanced trim to be a little bit more expensive than the current advanced trim at around $65,000 because of the extra feature content that we find on it, most notably the massaging front seats, etc. Now, the Type S Advanced, the most fully loaded version of the MDX, its pricing is probably going to stick pretty close to the outgoing model. My guess is maybe about $75,000, $76,000. That's a pretty decent deal, even though that price tag is a little on the large side for something with an Acura logo on it, because when you take a look at the European competition, they're going to be significantly more expensive, from a BMW X5 on up to a Mercedes-Benz GLE, or even a Volvo XC90. The XC90 gets pretty expensive, but it does, of course, get you a plug-in hybrid system, and it does get you 455 horsepower. But it's not going to have a corollary to the super handling all-wheel drive system that we find on this model. And that still is one of the biggest assets to the Acura lineup, really is super handling all-wheel drive. It's certainly more dynamic to drive than a Lexus RX or a Lexus TX or an Infiniti QX60, other vehicles right here in this same segment. And depending on the drivetrain we're talking about, more exciting than the Volvo XC90 as well. Not quite as quick, but certainly better handling. And that's part of why Acura has really focused on some of the Type S models in their lineup. The wider tires, the bigger brakes, the more aggressive styling, and of course, the more powerful engine under the hood. Again, if I were going to buy an MDX, I think the Type S is exactly where I would go. But we also have some options for 2025 because you don't need to get the Type S to get some of the nicer interior touches anymore. I really like the interior in that advanced trim right over there. The sort of mocha espresso leather going on, the lighter wood, the fact that we have basically the same seats with the massaging functionality, etc. I think that was a really smart move by Acura to move those seats over into the regular V6 model. So if you want to spend about 10 grand less, but you still want all that feature content, you now have a choice. And of course, the exhaust is going to be a little bit quieter as well. Now, one change I haven't mentioned yet, which I should at this point, is that Acura says the new MDX is going to be quieter than MDXs of the past. They've really focused on cabin isolation, adding additional sound deadening material to the interior, and that could bode well for the MDX. My one other complaint about the MDX in the past has been that the cabin, it's not the loudest in the segment, but it's not the quietest either. And hopefully a approximately 10% improvement in cabin sound levels could actually make this one of the quieter options out there. So be sure and let me know what you think about all that down there in the comments section. What do you think about the new Google infotainment system? Is the screen big enough, or should they have gone even bigger? Find me over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places. I'll see all of you next week. And of course, stay tuned. Hopefully I'll be driving one of these soon.